Welcome to Africal Tales. In the bustling heart of Lagos, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and the rhythm of ambition beat louder than the city's vibrant pulse, lived a woman whose name, Alejandra, echoed with the promise of destiny. Her life unfolded like a high fashion magazine spread, a kaleidoscope of designer labels, exclusive soirees, and the relentless climb up a corporate ladder she'd vowed to conquer. But beneath the shimmering facade of success, deep within the shadows of her towering aspirations, lay a love that withered, a devotion ignored, and a heart on the precipice of losing the very essence of what made life worth living. This is a tale whispered not by ancient spirits in a secluded grove, but by the very winds that sweep through the glittering glass towers of a modern African metropolis. A timeless warning that even in the pursuit of greatness, some visions, once blurred by ambition, may never fully regain their sight. The morning sun, usually a benevolent golden glow, felt like a spotlight on Alejandra as she stepped out of her executive apartment in Ocoee. Her heels, sharp as her ambition, clicked a confident rhythm against the polished marble. Each step a declaration of intent. Today was the day. The day she'd close the deal that would solidify her position not just as a manager, but as a force to be reckoned with in the cutthroat advertising world of Lagos. Her phone, a sleek extension of her arm, buzzed incessantly with emails and notifications, each a testament to her burgeoning empire. She barely registered the gentle hand that touched her arm, its warmth a stark contrast to the cool indifference she'd cultivated around her heart. It was Bayo, her steadfast, unwavering Bayo, his eyes dark and deep like a quiet evening lake, full of a love she'd grown accustomed to and perhaps taken for granted. He held out a small plate, a steaming puff, fried just the way she liked it, a peace offering to the morning rush. Alejandra, he said, his voice a soft murmur against the city's roar. You barely ate last night. I thought a little something before your big meeting. She glanced at the puff, then at her pristine white suit, and a flicker of irritation crossed her face. Bayo, I'm running late, and I can't risk a stain today. You know this. Her words, clipped and precise, felt like a small, sharp stone thrown into a still pond. His hand retreated, the plate lowered, but the love in his eyes didn't wane. It simply deepened, tinged now with a familiar sadness. As her chauffeur opened the car door, Alejandra offered a hurried, almost performative peck on his cheek, a gesture devoid of real intimacy. Wish me luck, she said, already turning away, her gaze fixed on the gleaming high-rises ahead, a silhouette of determination against the rising sun. Bayo watched her car disappear into the Lagos traffic, the puff still warm in his hand, a silent witness to a love that was slowly, yet surely, being overshadowed by the glint of gold. The elders say, a rich man without a good wife is poorer than a pauper, for gold cannot warm the heart. Bayo knew this truth, but Alejandra, it seems, was still learning. Bayo, unlike Alejandra, found solace not in the glittering chrome of new money, but in the echoes of tradition that still resonated within the sprawling maze of Lagos. He was a man rooted, much like the ancient Iroko tree that stood sentinel in his family's compound on the outskirts of Surulere. A graphic designer by profession, he pursued his craft with a quiet passion, creating vibrant art that celebrated Nigeria's rich heritage. He understood balance, the intricate dance between progress and preservation. His mornings, though often beginning with Alejandra's hurried departures, would usually transition to the hum of his own studio, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of charcoal from the nearby street vendors. He'd often reflect on their early days, a time when Alejandra, though ambitious, still possessed a softness, a willingness to share a plate of eba and agusi soup at a local buka, her eyes sparkling with dreams they built together, not just her own. He remembered a quiet evening years ago when they'd sat on the steps of her modest family home in Ageje, the sounds of market chatter drifting in, and Alejandra had laid her head on his shoulder, confiding her biggest fears and her wildest ambitions. "I want to touch the sky, Bale," she'd whispered. "I want to build something so monumental my ancestors will smile down on me." He had promised to climb that sky with her, hand in hand. Now, he often felt he was merely watching her ascend, a small, distant figure growing smaller with each success. His loyalty, a quiet fortress, encompassed not just Alejandra, but also the memory of that promise, a sacred vow whispered under a starry Lagos sky. His mother, a woman whose wisdom flowed as freely as the waters of the Ogun River, often told him, "A calm sea does not make a skilled sailor, my son, but a man who forgets his anchor will surely drift." Bale felt himself drifting, the anchor of their shared lives slowly slipping from Alejandra's grasp. He longed for the days when their laughter filled the air, when simply being together was their greatest achievement, before the city's relentless siren song had swallowed the melody of their love. Alejandra's ascent was meteoric, a spectacle observed with a mix of awe and envy within the polished corridors of Zenith Holdings. Her latest triumph, the multi-million naira digital campaign for a global tech giant, was hailed as a stroke of genius, solidifying her reputation as the Ice Queen of Ikoyi, a moniker she secretly relished. She commanded boardrooms with an icy intellect, her designer suits, tailored to perfection, mirroring the sharp edges of her mind. Lunches were quick, strategic affairs with influential clients and power brokers, often held at exclusive restaurants with panoramic views of the city she was meticulously conquering. There was no time for sentiment, no room for error. She once overheard a junior colleague refer to her as a man in a woman's body, and instead of offense, a flicker of pride ignited within her. In a city where men often dominated the highest echelons, she was proving that a woman, if driven enough, could shatter every glass ceiling with the force of her ambition. Her days bled into nights, spent networking at elite parties where the clinking of champagne glasses was the soundtrack to strategic alliances. She cultivated an image of unshakable confidence, a woman who needed nothing and no one, least of all a sentimental boyfriend who reminded her too much of the life she was desperately trying to leave behind, the humble beginnings she viewed as shackles. She pushed harder, worked longer, driven by an unyielding hunger for more power, more wealth, more recognition. The memory of her father's struggle, his quiet despair as he lost his small business, fueled her relentless drive. She had vowed then, a silent oath whispered into the Lagos night, that she would never again know the sting of poverty or the humiliation of relying on others. "The world," her father had often sighed, "is a marketplace, my child, where only the strongest survive." Alejandra had internalized this, turning it into her battle cry, unknowingly sacrificing the warmth of human connection for the cold embrace of success. She believed she was building an empire, brick by painful brick, but each brick seemed to cost her a piece of herself, a fragment of her soul that Bio once cherished. The cracks began subtly, almost imperceptibly, like hairline fractures on a grand edifice, visible only to those who looked closely. Bayo tried to bridge the growing chasm between them, arranging quiet dinners, suggesting a weekend getaway to Badagry, a place rich with history and serene beaches. Each attempt was met with a polite refusal, an urgent work commitment, or a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Bayo, you know how important this quarter is, she'd say, her voice devoid of apology. I can't just drop everything for a beach trip. He watched her drift further, her eyes once filled with shared dreams, now scanning boardrooms and spreadsheets. Their conversations became transactional, brief exchanges about her schedule, never about their shared lives, their feelings, or the dying embers of their once vibrant love. He would often find himself preparing her favorite jollof rice, spiced just right, waiting late into the night for her to come home exhausted, eat a few bites mechanically, and retreat to her thoughts, her phone, her ambition. One particularly poignant evening, Bayo had planned a surprise anniversary dinner. He'd transformed their apartment into a romantic haven, lit candles, played their favorite old-school Nigerian jams from the 90s, and even bought her a small, elegant Adire fabric scarf, a nod to their cultural roots. Alejandra arrived home past midnight, smelling faintly of expensive perfume and corporate air. Her expression when she saw the candles and the untouched dinner was not of gratitude, but exasperation. Bayo, what is this? I told you I had the quarterly review dinner tonight. I'm exhausted. I don't have the energy for theatrics. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. He felt a deep ache in his chest, a wound opening where joy was meant to be. He extinguished the candles one by one, watching the light disappear, a metaphor for their relationship. His auntie Ibidun, a wise woman who lived in the family compound, once warned him, when the corn grows too tall, it forgets the soil that fed it. Bayo realized Alejandra's ambition had indeed grown too tall, obscuring the foundations of their love. He saw the emptiness in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a relentless pursuit that left no room for vulnerability. He saw the luxury, but he also saw the loneliness that came with it. Heavy with a sorrow he could no longer carry alone, Bayo sought solace and counsel from his auntie Ibidun. Her small, humble compound on the edges of Surulere was a world away from Alejandra's gleaming high-rise, a sanctuary where the scents of wood smoke and traditional herbs mingled with the murmur of ancient proverbs. Auntie Ibidun, her face a roadmap of life's experiences, listened intently as Bayo recounted the deepening chasm between him and Alejandra. She sat, her hands resting on her lap, occasionally nodding, her eyes seeing far beyond the immediate words, into the very spirit of the matter. Her gaze warm yet penetrating, finally settled on Bayo, reflecting a profound understanding. "My son," she began, her voice a gentle rasp, "the river that forgets its banks will surely flood the village, and a hungry ghost, no matter how much it consumes, will always remain hungry." She spoke of the dangers of insatiable desire, of measuring one's worth by the height of one's possessions rather than the depth of one's character. She reminded him of the concept of omoluabi, the Yoruba term for a person of impeccable character, embodying courage, hard work, humility, and respect. Alejandra has forgotten the spirit of omoluabi. She chases shadows, believing them to be substance. But true substance, my son, lies in the connections we forge, the love we nurture, the community we build. She spoke of the delicate balance of a successful marriage, not merely a union of two individuals, but a weaving of two families, two destinies, a tapestry that requires constant care and mutual respect. She warned him that the spirits of the ancestors who watch over their descendants do not look kindly upon those who cast aside true love for fleeting earthly treasures. The ancestors, she said, her voice dropping to an almost inaudible whisper, speak in whispers and signs. Listen closely, Bio. Sometimes the greatest lessons are learned when the wind carries away what we once thought we could not live without. Bio left his auntie's compound with a heavy heart, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he couldn't force Alejandra to see, but he could continue to embody the values she seemed to be forgetting, hoping that one day she might remember the path back to the heart of what truly mattered. Alejandra's next big move was not just a career advancement, it was a moral tightrope walk. Her company, Zenith Holdings, was bidding on a lucrative government contract to build an innovative e-learning platform for rural schools. The catch? To secure the deal, a rival, smaller tech startup pioneering genuinely impactful local solutions needed to be discredited, a euphemism for a smear campaign and intellectual property theft. Her boss, Mr. Akanbi, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, presented it as a necessary evil, a standard practice in their competitive landscape. This is how the game is played, Alejandra, he purred. You either play to win, or you lose everything you've built. The choice weighed on her, a chilling stone in the pit of her stomach. She knew the startup, EduConnect, was run by a brilliant young woman, a former university classmate, who genuinely aimed to uplift communities. Alejandra had seen their pitch, modest but heartfelt, brimming with authentic potential. Yet, the allure of the government contract, the power and prestige it promised, was a siren song too potent to resist. The late nights she spent crafting the discrediting strategy felt like a betrayal, not just of a competitor, but of her own conscience. Her hand trembled as she finalized the predatory proposal, the sleek glass office reflecting the hollow victory already taking root. The thought of Bayo and his unyielding integrity flashed through her mind, a brief, unwelcome flicker of light in the moral darkness. The path to power, she rationalized, her voice a whisper in the empty office, is rarely clean. This is the price of legacy. But even as the words solidified her resolve, a chilling premonition gnawed at her. She recalled Auntie Indidone's proverb Bayo had once shared. The scorpion's sting brings pain not only to its victim, but also to itself if it strikes without thought. Alejandra was striking, but the venom was beginning to seep into her own veins. She sealed the deal, a deal bought with the integrity of others, unknowingly planting seeds of future turmoil that would grow into a thorny forest around her. That night, a strange, unsettling dream invaded Alejandra's hyper-efficient sleep. She found herself in a dense, unfamiliar forest, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms. The trees, ancient and garnered, seemed to watch her with countless eyes. Ahead, a path, barely visible, led towards a distant, shimmering light. But as she tried to walk, her designer heels sank into the mud, trapping her. An old woman, her face etched with the wisdom of 1,000 rains, emerged from the shadows, her eyes milky and ancient, fixed on Alejandra. The old woman did not speak, but pointed a garnered finger towards Alejandra's briefcase, which now lay open on the muddy ground, spilling not documents, but withered leaves and dead flowers. Then the old woman slowly raised her other hand, revealing a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings broken. Alejandra woke with a gasp, the image of the broken bird searing into her mind, a deep sense of unease settling over her. She brushed it off as mere stress, the residue of her recent ethical compromise. Yet the dream lingered, a persistent echo in the back of her mind. Later that week, a series of uncanny events began to unfold. Her usually reliable luxury car broke down inexplicably on the Third Mainland Bridge, delaying her for a crucial meeting. Her favorite diamond earring, a gift from herself to celebrate a past achievement, vanished without a trace, only to reappear days later in a place she was certain she'd checked repeatedly. Then, while reviewing the final presentation for the government contract, a sleek black ibis, a bird traditionally associated with omens in some cultures, perched directly outside her 10th floor office window, staring at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. It simply sat there, unmoving, its dark eyes unblinking, until Alejandra, unnerved, pulled the blinds shut. She dismissed them as coincidences, figments of an overactive imagination fueled by pressure. But deep down, a primal fear, a forgotten ancestral whisper stirred within her. When the spirits speak, Auntie Ibudun had told Bayo, they do not always use a human tongue. Sometimes they use the whispers of the wind, the flight of a bird, or the rustle of leaves. Alejandra, however, was too immersed in the din of ambition to hear these ancient warnings. She was beginning to feel that the ground beneath her meticulously constructed empire was subtly, steadily shifting. In the quiet solitude of her sprawling penthouse, a place Bayo rarely visited anymore, Alejandra often found herself staring at a framed, faded photograph on her bedside table. It depicted a younger, more innocent her, standing beside her father, a man whose face, despite the years, still held the gentle lines of worry and fatigue. This photograph was a portal to a past she rarely spoke of, a hidden wound that fueled her relentless drive. A flashback would often seize her, transporting her to a cramped, stifling apartment in a less glamorous part of Lagos, the air humid with unfulfilled dreams. She was 12, clutching her father's hand as he pleaded with the landlord, his voice cracking with desperation. The family had lost everything when his small tailoring business collapsed, a victim of unforeseen economic shifts and predatory business practices by larger corporations. That night, her mother, a woman who rarely showed emotion, had wept silently into her pillow. Alejandra had seen the fear, the humiliation, the utter helplessness in her parents' eyes. In that moment, a silent vow had been forged in the crucible of her young heart. She would never, ever be poor again. She would build an empire so vast, so unshakable, that no force, no greedy landlord, no economic downturn could ever touch her family. This secret, this burning desire to protect and avenge, was the engine of her ambition, a raw, primal fear she'd never confessed to anyone, not even Bayo. She had always presented a facade of self-made brilliance, never revealing the deep-seated insecurity that propelled her. This hidden wound, however, had twisted her understanding of success, equating love and happiness with material security alone. It was why Bayo's quiet devotion, so gentle and unconditional, felt almost irrelevant in her grand scheme. He couldn't protect her from the ghosts of her past. Only wealth, she believed, could do that. In her mind, she was fighting a war, and love was a luxury she couldn't afford on the battlefield. She didn't realize that in her desperate escape from a remembered nightmare, she was creating a new, more profound emptiness, a lonely fortress built on the shifting sands of fear. The contract was signed. The news of Zenith Holdings' victory over EduConnect reverberated through the industry, and Alejandro was lauded as the architect of their triumph. She received a hefty bonus, a promotion to senior vice president, and an exclusive invitation to join the board of a prestigious women's business association. Her name was printed in glossy magazines, her face gracing the covers, an icon of modern African success. She finally bought the sprawling mansion in Banana Island she'd always coveted, a fortress of opulence overlooking the serene lagoon. On the night she moved in, she stood alone on her expansive balcony, the city lights shimmering below like scattered diamonds. The air was cool, the silence profound, almost deafening. This was it, the pinnacle, everything she had ever strived for. But the champagne tasted flat. The vast rooms filled with expensive furniture and art felt cold and empty. There was no one to share her victory with, no shared laughter echoing through the halls. Bio had stopped trying to reach her after the anniversary dinner debacle, retreating into his quiet stoicism. Her parents, though proud of her achievements, seemed distant. Their conversations centered on trivialities, never truly touching the core of her isolated existence. The emptiness, a cavernous void, yawned open within her. She scrolled through her phone, a sea of congratulations from colleagues and acquaintances, but not a single message that truly warmed her heart. The weight of her achievements felt less like a crown and more like a yoke, heavy and suffocating. She remembered Auntie Ibidan's proverb Bio had once shared. A tree laden with fruit, if its roots are shallow, will soon topple in the storm. Alejandra realized her branches were heavy with the fruits of success, but her roots, severed from genuine connection and love, felt frighteningly fragile. This was the moment she understood the bitter irony. She had built an empire, only to find herself its solitary queen, ruling over a kingdom of gilded loneliness. The fragile piece of Alejandra's gilded cage shattered when Bayo arrived at her new mansion, unannounced, a week after her move. He stood at the imposing doorway, not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating resolve that chilled her more than any outburst. Alejandra, he began, his voice low, firm. We need to talk, truly talk. Not about your deals, not about your next promotion, about us, about what we've become. She tried to dismiss him, citing an early morning conference call, but he simply walked past her into the cavernous living room, his eyes sweeping over the lavish decor, a silent judgment hanging in the air. He didn't raise his voice, but his words, when they came, carried the weight of years of neglect. I loved the girl who dreamed of touching the sky, Alejandra, not this woman who has forgotten the earth beneath her feet. Then he dropped the bombshell, a secret she had buried deep within her, a fear that had haunted her for years, shaping her ambition in ways she couldn't admit. I know you've been seeing a fertility specialist, Alejandra. I found the clinic's brochure in your old apartment. You never told me, Alejandra. You never shared that burden, that fear with me. The air crackled with unspoken truths. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in her eyes. The stigma of infertility, particularly for a woman in an African society, was a heavy cross to bear. And she had carried it alone, believing her corporate achievements could somehow compensate for this perceived failing. She had pushed Bio away partly because she couldn't bear the thought of failing him as well, of depriving him of the family she knew he longed for. I I just didn't want you to leave me, she choked out, the confession tearing through her. I thought if I was successful enough, strong enough, you wouldn't care, that it wouldn't matter. Bio stepped closer, his face etched with sorrow. Alejandra, love is not a transaction. It's not something you earn with accolades or buy with mansions. It's a choice. And I chose you, regardless. But you chose ambition. His words were a mirror, reflecting the devastating truth of her choices, forcing her to confront the emptiness she had filled with gold, an emptiness that now echoed with the unspoken pain of a heart breaking, not just his, but her own. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel way of delivering its lessons. No sooner had Alejandra's confession hung in the air, a raw wound exposed, than the carefully built towers of her professional life began to sway. The initial cracks, once mere whispers, now became gaping fissures. The very government contracts she had fought so ruthlessly for, the one built on the betrayal of EduConnect, came under intense scrutiny. A whistleblower, a disgruntled former Zenith Holdings employee with the conscience Bayo would have admired, leaked documents detailing the unethical practices, the intellectual property theft, and the thinly veiled smear campaign that had secured the deal. The scandal erupted like a wildfire, engulfing Zenith Holdings in a maelstrom of bad press and legal battles. Alejandra, as the architect of the deal, became the public face of the company's downfall. Her carefully curated image shattered, splashed across headlines as the Ice Queen with a rotten core. The board, quick to distance themselves from the controversy, launched an internal investigation. Her supposed allies, the very power brokers she had courted, vanished like smoke, their loyalty as thin as the air in their exclusive clubs. Mr. Akanbi, her smirking boss, offered superficial condolences while subtly shifting blame onto her. Her direct reports, once eager to please, now eyed her with a mixture of fear and quiet contempt. The lavish mansion in Banana Island, once a symbol of her triumph, became a gilded prison, the silence within its walls amplifying her growing despair. She started receiving anonymous threats, hateful messages from proponents of EduConnect, reminding her of the damage she had inflicted. Then came the ultimate blow. A notice from Zenith Holdings announcing her immediate suspension pending the outcome of the investigation. Stripped of her title, her power, her external validation, Alejandra found herself adrift, a ship without a rudder in the stormy seas of public condemnation. When the chameleon loses its camouflage, Auntie Ibidun once said, it becomes visible to all its predators. Alejandra was now exposed, realizing the true cost of her relentless climbing and the bitter taste of a success built on deceit. Stripped of her corporate power and public admiration, Alejandra retreated into the hollow shell of her mansion, the silence a constant, unforgiving companion. Her designer clothes felt like costumes, her expensive jewelry a burden. For days, she existed in a fog of self-pity and resentment, blaming everyone but herself. But the dream of the broken wooden bird returned, more vivid, more haunting. She started to see the signs, the universe's persistent whispers that she had so arrogantly dismissed. The stalled car, the lost earring, the unwavering ibis. They were not coincidences, but gentle nudges, warnings she had stubbornly ignored. The sting of Bayo's quiet confession, the revelation of her own unshared fear, began to chip away at her hardened heart. She remembered his unwavering loyalty, his constant, gentle efforts to keep their love alive, and the shame washed over her in waves. Pride, as her mother used to say, is a fortress that keeps out friends and welcomes sorrow. One evening, driven by an unbearable loneliness and a burgeoning realization, she picked up her phone, her fingers trembling. She didn't call a lawyer or former colleague. She called Auntie Ebedun. The old woman's voice, when it answered, was calm and unhurried, as if she had been expecting the call. Alejandra, tears streaming down her face, confessed everything: the ruthless ambition, the betrayal of EduConnect, the deep-seated fear of infertility, and the crushing weight of her spiritual emptiness. Auntie Abadana listened patiently, then spoke, her words like a balm. "My child, the river may overflow its banks, but it can always find its way back to its course. The ancestors grants forgiveness to those who seek it with a true heart." She urged Alejandra to look inward, to acknowledge the damage she had caused, and to begin the difficult journey of mending. She suggested Alejandra return to her roots, truly connect with her family, and seek out the young woman she had wronged at EduConnect. The words were not a path to professional redemption, but to a deeper, more profound healing. It was the first time in years Alejandra felt a genuine, albeit painful, sense of direction, a faint glimmer of light cutting through the darkness of her self-imposed exile. The path to redemption was long and arduous, paved not with designer heels, but with humility and painstaking effort. Alejandra first sought out her parents, not with lavish gifts or tales of corporate conquests, but with honest apologies and heartfelt conversations. She sat with them, sharing stories, listening to their wisdom, reconnecting with the family values she had abandoned. Then, with a courage born of newfound sincerity, she went to the offices of EduConnect. The meeting with her former classmate Amara was difficult, fraught with tension and justifiable anger. Alejandra didn't offer excuses. She offered a truthful account of her actions, expressing deep remorse and offering to use her connections and remaining resources to help rebuild what she had destroyed. It was a slow process, but over time, a fragile bridge of trust began to form, built on honesty and a shared vision for societal good. She accepted a voluntary position with a local NGO focused on rural education, working from the ground up, her hands now stained with real dust, not just the metaphorical dust of ambition. She learned to appreciate the simple joy of communal effort, the power of collective purpose, a stark contrast to her solitary pursuit of individual glory. And Bayo, their reconciliation was the most delicate work of all. He didn't immediately return to her, but he listened. He saw the genuine transformation, the softening of her hardened edges, the authentic light returning to her eyes. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to rebuild. Weekly visits to Auntie Abidin's compound became a ritual where Alejandra absorbed ancient wisdom, learning about patience, forgiveness, and the subtle art of true partnership. She learned about traditional marriage customs, not as outdated relics, but as frameworks for communal harmony and mutual respect. She confronted her fears about infertility head-on, sharing her journey with Bayo, who, in turn, offered unwavering support, reminding her that their love was not dependent on children, but on their bond. In time, the laughter returned to her eyes, the warmth to her touch. Alejandra never regained her corporate empire, nor did she seek it. Instead, she found something far more precious: an inner peace, a deeper purpose, and a love that had weathered her storm of ambition. She embraced the Yoruba proverb, "What is good is better than what is beautiful," understanding that a life rooted in love, honesty, and communal harmony was infinitely more fulfilling than any glittering facade of success. She became a woman who understood that the true measure of wealth lay not in what you accumulated, but what you nurtured, what you healed, and what you shared.